reasonable suspicion and belief of the facts stated. So that's been established. So Senator Clark, burden's on you, and so you're up to testify. And if you will pull that chair and come over here first and be sworn. Now, before I swear you in, you don't have to testify. Your affidavit can serve as your testimony, but you certainly can testify.
Senator Clark intends to testify. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But I just wanted to make sure you understand you didn't have to. Put your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, if you just kind of pull that so people can see you, we can see you too. I appreciate that. Mr. Wallace, this is yours.
Mr. Chairman, would the panel mind if I moved up a little bit?
No, not at all.
That'd be great, thank you.
There's a cord going between your chairs.
Maybe you won't take Mr. Senator.
Let me unplug that for you.
Take Senator Clark's chair.
Well, the cord's going through all of them. I'll get that.
Thank you. That's not a problem.
Just like that, probably.
Are you okay?
So far.
Senator Clark, would you state your full name for us, please?
Robert Benjamin Clark III,
And where do you reside, sir?
603 East Lake Ridge Road, Rayford, North Carolina.
And in what county is that?
Polk County.
All right. And are you the incumbent senator representing the 21st Senate District?
That's correct, I am.
You're currently seeking your 4th term in that office,
That's correct, I am.
Now, the Senate District is comprised of Hope County and part of Cumberland County, correct?
That's correct.
You grew up in Cumberland County.
That's correct.
Were born here, went to high school here,
That's correct.
and joined the military.
That's correct. Air Force.
And upon retirement from the Air Force, did you return to this part of North Carolina?
After a year in Maryland, I returned to Hope County to take up residence in the property that my family and I had built.
All right. Tell us about that property. Give us the address again, if you will.
Okay, 6003 East Lake Ridge Road, Rayford, North Carolina. If you don't mind, I'll back up and give you a little bit of historical perspective on how it came about. Because I know a lot of times in the press people read, oh, he's staying at his dad's house. That's impossible. There's no way the guy's staying at his dad's house. But when I was a young captain in the United States Air Force, I was home on vacation one time, and my father said, hey, son, I'd like to build a big house. Maybe by today's standards it's not so big, but in the standards of about 30 years ago, it was a very, very large house. 5 bedrooms upstairs, 1 downstairs, big, large family room, music room, whole 9 yards on 6 acres of property, 6 acres of land, lakefront. But he knew he couldn't do this by himself. He was going to need additional support, financial support. So he asked me would I be willing to go in on it with him. I said, no problem, Dad. You're going to do something like this and know it's going to be successful. As a matter of fact, I remember he told me after the fact, one of his friends came up to him and said, Dr. Clark, you're trying to build a rich man's house on poor man's money. But I tell you, we were successful in doing that. And I was willing to participate in that endeavor, even knowing that I would never really step inside of that house in a real sense, probably for another decade and a half. It's like I said, I was in the Air Force, so I had to go back to my duty assignments. I traveled all across Europe and the continental United States. So ultimately, when I did come back to the area, I decided, well, this is going to be my home, not just because it was my father's house. It was my father's house. It was my mother's house. It was my house. So when the press wants to speak of it as staying in my dad's house, well, it's my house as well, legally and in every respect, in form and fashion.
When was that construction work completed at that time?
Okay, I can't remember the exact years, but I'll say the actual construction work was probably completed in the late 80s/early 90s. Can't remember the exact year right off the top of my head. A lot of dates floating around.
All right. And You were 20 years on active duty,
That's correct.
and you were at least 1 year after active duty teaching high school, as I recall.
Yes, when I retired from the Air Force, I stayed up in Maryland, and I taught at Charles Herbert Flowers High School. I was in the science and technology program there, so I taught engineering graphics, and I taught energy, basic electronics, and a basic technology course. And I planned to stay up there for a longer period of time, but due to the family situation back home, that's what brought me back earlier than I'd initially anticipated in terms of coming back to Hope County.
What year was it that you returned from Maryland?
That was 2002.
And when you returned, did you move back into the home?
Yes, I moved to 603 Slate Ridge Road.
All right. And did you register to vote at that time
I sure did.
in Hope County?
Hope County, that's correct.
And have you, at any time since that time, registered to vote in any other place?
No, sir, I have not.
Is that home the home to which you intend to return whenever you leave?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, it even has a sentimental value, as you might understand why. I mean, and you know, you don't want to talk about your family, but my father's health is not what it used to be. You know, he's approaching 80 now. And for me to abandon that property would be like abandoning my family. Not going to happen.
And you, during that time period from 2002 to the present, have resided there yourself? Have you
That's
not?
correct.
And you live there today.
Yep.
Do you maintain various accounts with suppliers of utilities and
I do.
the like? I'm going to offer you a collection of exhibits, if I may.
Are these accounts that are listed as part of his affidavit?
Yes. And I believe you offered,
We've already, yeah, I've already offered that into evidence since it was filed with our
all right,
respective boards, so you can, you know, refer to that.
and is that then?
It's Exhibit B.
Exhibit B, is that right?
Yes.
Senator Clark, I'm going to offer you what has been marked as
All right.
Exhibit B and ask you, if you will, to go through this collection. Now, these various papers are the documents which you attached to your response to the affidavit filed in this matter, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Would you look at the very first document, the top document, please?
All right.
Turn back a page, if you will, and look at that top document. Tell us what that is.
That's a picture of the house that I took just for so that the
All right,
panel
that's-
members could see it.
And that's page 5 of 12, is it not?
That's correct.
And the next page, if you would take a look at that and tell us what that is, please.
That's the North Carolina Deed of Trust from 1988, which has myself, my mother, my father as owners of the property.
All right. And take a look, if you will, at the next page, page number 7 of the 12.
That's a picture of my driver's license showing 603 State Ridge Road as my home address.
And is that driver's license your current driver's license?
That's correct.
And have you maintained your driver's license at that address since returning to North Carolina in
That's correct.
2002? Look, if you will, at the next page, page 8 of 12. Tell us what that is.
That's an electric bill from Lumber River EMC showing that I made a payment on, or they received a payment March 12, 2018.
And is that an electrical account maintained at the home at East Lake Ridge Road?
That's correct.
Okay, look at the next document, next page, if you will, please. Identify that, if you will.
That's a pay stub from my main employer, General Dynamics, and it has how much I made for a 2-week period.
And was that transmitted to you at your home address?
That's correct.
And that home address is shown as East Lake Ridge Road?
That's correct. I actually receive my payments electronically, so I don't get it.
All right, thank you. And if you would turn the page and tell us what that next page is.
That's a statement from USAA linked to my, one of my investment accounts there, and it just has my home address. This is 603 Slate Ridge Road.
All right. And to the next page, if you will, please.
That's my Pentagon Federal Credit Union account, again showing my address is 603 Slate Ridge Road.
And the following page, the last page in that collection, if you will, please.
That's my registration from October 28, 2002, found on the website of the North Carolina State Board of Elections, showing that I'm registered banker.
All right. And have you maintained that registration since you registered in 2002?
I have.
And you have not at any time transferred that registration to any other county?
I have not.
And is it true that you and your wife own property in other locations?
That's correct.
Okay, where do you own property other than East Lake Ridge Road?
Own property in Cumberland County in Lumberton.
All right. Tell me about the Lumberton property, if you will.
Lumberton property is the house that we purchased for my wife's mother. And the property in Cumberland County is a second home that we purchased over in Vander.
And do you also have commercial property in Cumberland County?
Yes, I have a office condominium suite on Rayford Road.
Okay. And notwithstanding the purchase and the ownership of these several properties, you've never intended to abandon your property in Hope County?
Absolutely not.
All right. And when you go home at night, where do you go?
603 Slate Ridge Road.
Okay. Have you ever spent the night at the second home that was constructed
I have.
in Vander?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you made that your residence?
No, sir.
And does that home have utility services,
That's correct.
electrical and water?
That's correct.
In whose account are those? Whose accounts are maintained at that property?
And my wife.
Have you ever, by any act of which you're aware, evidenced an intention to abandon your property in Hope County?
Absolutely
East
not.
Ridge Road. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Your witness.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Clark, first of all, thank you for your service with the United States Air Force. We certainly all appreciate it. My name is John Austin. I represent Mr. Aguirre, and I've just got a few questions for you. You stated both in your affidavit, which is marked as Exhibit B, and during your testimony here that you are the legal owner and resident of 603 East Lake Ridge Road. What gives you, what's the basis for your testimony?
One part, because my father, my mother, and I agreed back in the early 90s that we would purchase that house and it would be mine, and also that I was on the title to that property.
Okay. And are you testifying that the whole idea was that it always stay yours, your property?
Yes.
And that's your testimony today?
Yeah.
And that you own it today?
Say again?
And that you own it presently?
That's correct.
Do you know when that deed of trust was paid off?
We paid off the mortgage on the property, I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago. I can't remember exactly the exact date.
Well, I'm looking at page 6 of your affidavit. It looks like there was a deed of trust paid off in 1994.
Well, the house wasn't paid off then. I know that. We didn't pay off the house until a couple of years ago. The mortgage.
Okay. Are you saying that there was a second mortgage on the house?
I know that over time we've refinanced. That's right.
Okay. And who was that refinance with?
I don't recall the institution.
You don't know who, you just paid it off 2 years ago? You don't remember who the bank was?
I certainly don't.
Okay.
I gave my parents permission to execute loans on my behalf, so I'm not I don't remember the exact.
Would there, that would have required a power of attorney? Are you telling me that there's a power of attorney recorded?
Yes, that was done early on in the early, late 80s, early 90s, because like I said, I traveled out of the country, so they were going to have to be able to execute things in my name. And I was not going to be able to travel back and forth in order for them to be able to do that.
And that would have been a power of attorney filed in Hope County?
I don't know where it was filed, to be quite honest. I assume so, but I don't know.
Okay. Because it looks like you bought the property back in '88, would that be about right?
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Now, prior to purchasing the property, was this in the family?
No, it wasn't.
It was owned by the Wiles, Dale and Wiles?
I certainly don't remember who owned it 30 years ago.
Okay. And that's fine?
Yeah. But we were residing in Hollywood Heights in Cumberland County at the time.
Let me hand this up. And it's been marked as Exhibit C. And if you just pad that to the board, everybody gets a copy. Can you identify what's been marked as Exhibit C?
Oh, what's it saying there?
Yeah.
What do you want me to do with it?
I just need you to identify what it is.
It's a document.
Okay.
I mean, I haven't had time to review it in advance, so I don't want to venture a guess as to what all is in there.
Well, this is your time to do that.
You may examine it, identify it for him if you're able to.
Okay, let's see. It says filed July 26, 1988, time 19:13 a.m., book 260, page 889. Tax lot number verified by, parcel identifier number, county of, day of, 19, whatever. North Carolina General Warranty deed.
Okay. And you own property. You own a number of pieces of property,
Yes.
correct? Okay. So you're familiar about real estate property ownership?
Well, I wouldn't say that. No more than an average person owns a house. I don't get into all the legalese. You just buy the property and live in it.
Okay. Well, but you also have an office condo,
That's correct.
and you own 2 residences.
Yep.
And your wife, you own, and then your wife's home, mother's home,
Yep.
you own that as well.
Mhm.
And then you have some investment property that's not developed, is that right?
No, it's an office condo actually in use. I rent it out right now.
Okay, I thought there might be some spare property out there
No, no.
that's not developed?
Nothing like that.
Okay, all right. And you're saying that's fairly typical for a person to own 4 or 5 pieces of property?
I didn't
I
say it
don't
was
think
typical.
he's had that objection.
I didn't say that.
Okay, okay.
I said it's probably typical that when people buy property,
Okay.
they don't necessarily delve into all the legalese. You know, you sit in front of an attorney like yourself, and in about 30 minutes, they have you initial your name 20 million times, so.
Okay.
I'm not-
But you
So-
go
so
see
this is-
attorneys and seek their advice regarding real estate
Well,
purchases?
I have one there. Yeah. Well, mind you, a lot of this stuff was done over decades ago, so my mind's not actually clear on all the details that transpired,
Okay.
with the exception of the recent purchase of home.
Well, let me hand you what's going to be marked as Exhibit Number D.
And I do have a lot of other stuff going on in my life, now that you ask.
If you'll take a look at that.
Pass this down.
Please, thank you. Can you identify what's been marked as Exhibit Number D?
It's a North Carolina general warranty deed.
Okay. And who is the grantor of this warranty deed?
Me, Robert B. Clark III.
Okay. And who are you granting the property to?
Let's see, Robert B. Clark Jr. and wife Eileen H. Clark.
Okay. And who are they?
My parents.
Okay. Is this the property that you contend is your residence that
That's
you
correct.
own? Do you see that you've deeded the property away?
No, I don't see that.
You don't understand this as a general warranty deed, and what a general warranty deed does?
I don't see this as that I've deeded my ownership in the property away.
Okay.
If that's what you're asking.
Tell me why.
Tell me why should I? I'm not the attorney.
So you have some opinion as this does not convey
No.
property?
That's correct.
Okay, tell us what the grounds of that opinion is.
Because I don't understand why it should be there. To be quite honest, I'm not an attorney.
You do own property,
That's correct.
and you've traded property before, bought and sold property,
That's correct.
and you were able to identify the other general warranty deed where,
No, I was able to read off this document and tell you what it said.
okay. Well, do you see where the witness part says that the grantor, and you're identified as the grantor? Do you want to go ahead and read that part?
It says Robert B. Clark III.
Okay. Down below this line here, it starts with witnesses. Why don't you read that part?
Let's see. The grantor for a valuable consideration paid by the grantee, the receipt of which is hereby acknowledged, has and by these presents does grant, bargain, sell, and convey the grantee fee simple certain interest, certain one-half interest in parcel of land situated in Rayford, McLaughlin Township, whatever.
Okay. Well, do you see that this has,
I don't see anything.
okay, you don't understand that language?
No, I don't. Do you?
Unfortunately,
because
you
you're
don't get to
attorney.
ask me questions. I only, so you don't understand the basic language of a general warranty deed?
I don't understand that language that I just read.
Okay. Do you understand that these deeds are kept in the registry of deeds?
That's correct.
And that they're public knowledge?
That's correct.
And that they're public record?
That's correct.
Do you have any reason to believe that this is not a valid general warranty deed conveying your interest to your parents?
That's correct.
So,
I know I signed documents that allow them to operate on my behalf. If that's what this means, I understand that. If it means something else, I don't understand that.
okay. And it looks like that they signed, it's signed by your attorney in fact, which is your father.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, when you purchased property in Cumberland County, did you again go see an attorney?
I work with the real estate agent, if you're talking about the office condo. And then he had an attorney that worked with us.
Okay. Let me just go back and circle back up before we get into there. Now, having seen exhibit number D, do you still contend that you're the legal owner of the property at 603 East Lake Ridge Road?
I do,
That's your testimony today?
yes.
Even though you've got a deed of trust that's, I mean, a deed, a general warranty deed, that conveys your one-half interest to your parents?
I don't perceive that this takes away my ownership of the property.
Okay.
And as we know, it's irrelevant anyway. This is still my own.
Do you have any brothers or sisters?
Sure do.
Do you know if they would stand to inherit part of that property?
No. I mean, they wouldn't,
Okay. And why do you say that?
because I'm on the will to inherit it all.
Now, in your affidavit, you says, I have never stated verbally or in writing an intent to abandon my residence in Hope County and make my second home in Cumberland County my official residence.
That's correct.
Is that still your testimony today?
That's correct.
Let me hand you what's being marked as Exhibit E. You pass this to the panel, sir. Thank you. Can you identify what's been marked as Exhibit E?
Deed of trust.
Okay. And this is, it shows the borrowers are Dion Clark. Who is that?
That's my wife.
Okay. And then Robert Benjamin Clark III, and that's you, is that right? And when did you execute this deed of trust?
It was around February.
Okay. You may want to hold on to it, and then that way you can just refer to it. Was it February 6th?
Says February 6th.
Okay. Now, I want you to take a look. Well, at the top right, you can see where it was filed, February 10th, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And that was filed here in Cumberland County, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and this house is in Cumberland County, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, look at the bottom, and you see under H, riders, there's some boxes there to check. And adjustable rate rider.
Yes, sir. I see.
Okay, and that's the loan that you got?
Yes.
Okay, do you remember what the terms of that loan were?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. And then it says second home rider, and that is not checked, is it?
No.
Okay. And then it says 1-4 family rider.
Mm-hmm.
You see that? And that's not checked either.
Right.
Okay. And then this type of loan is a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac loan, correct?
Okay.
Okay. And did you execute this in the Barfield Law Firm in February 2017?
That's correct.
Okay. And was Mr. Barfield there?
I believe he was the attorney there. Yeah.
Okay. In fact, if you look on page 13 of 13, he notarized your signature, correct?
That's, where am I looking, sir?
Oh, on page 13, there's a notary.
Oh, okay, yes, sir.
See the seal?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the seal says Douglas Barfield Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Have you used him before?
No, sir.
Okay. But you used him for this, and you went through these papers with him?
Yes, sir.
And I'm sure he said, if you got any questions, just let me know. Is that right?
Right.
And you signed each and every one of these pages, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Initial.
And that's both you and your wife, correct?
That's correct.
Now, on page 6 of 6, do you see that page in which you initialed?
Page what? 6 of 6.
I mean, I'm sorry, 6 of 13. It's been a long day.
Yes, sir. I see that.
Okay. Now, do you see the sections number 6, occupancy,
Yes.
and then number 8, loan application?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I've blown those up to make it a little bit easier to read.
Okay.
Here you go. I'm getting old and I've got to see things bigger. I've marked these blow-ups as exhibit number 4. Exhibit number F.
Do you have one? No.
Okay. Can you read for us number 6?
Yeah, number 6 says occupancy. Borrower shall occupy, establish, and use the property as borrower's principal residence within 60 days after execution of this security instrument, and shall continue to occupy the property as borrower's principal residence for at least 1 year after the date of occupancy, unless lender otherwise agrees in writing, which consent shall not be unreasonably withheld, or unless extenuating circumstances exist which are beyond the borrower's control.
Okay. So here you're representing that you would use this as your primary residence in February. Is that right?
That's not correct,
How is that not correct?
because my wife is the borrower.
Well, let's go back to page 1 of the exhibit.
Page 1.
I'm sorry, of Exhibit E. And you'll see under definitions, B, borrower.
Right?
Who are listed as the borrowers?
It says borrower is R. Dion Clark, and husband, Robert B. Clark III.
Okay. And you'll agree with me that you initialed this page. You actually initialed this page.
Yes.
Okay. So did you notify the bank that you were not going to live there?
The bank knew that because the bank is the one who provided us with the loan, and as a part of making the request for a loan, my wife was listed as the borrower with the intent that she would occupy the house as necessary. As a matter of fact, the only reason I ended up having to serve as a co-borrower, if you will, which meant I did not have an obligation to stay on the property, was because she needed me to sign in order to get the loan.
Okay. So she needed you to sign in order to get the loan itself?
Essentially to be a security, I guess. The bank wanted to make sure that the loan could be paid.
Okay, because sometimes you could sign off and you wouldn't be on the promissory note, but you're telling me you're also on the promissory note, that you borrowed the money.
That's right.
Okay.
As a co-borrower.
Okay,
Not
so
as
you
the
are,
borrower.
so you'd admit with me that you are the borrower?
The co-borrower.
That you're co-borrower, okay.
And by definition, the co-borrower,
Okay. Is it somewhere here in this deed of trust?
it's not in the deed of trust, but my wife is the borrower and I'm the co-borrower.
And that you did not have to live there? Are you saying that there's a
Nope.
bank document that
There's
at State Employees Credit Union for a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac that says you do not need to live there? Is
What
that
it
your
says
testimony?
is the borrower has to live there. It doesn't say the co-borrower has to live there. Be more accurate.
So there's not a special form that you had filled out?
There's
there?
nothing special that requires me to have the obligation to occupy the house.
What gives you that opinion?
That's why I find the house.
Okay. I don't see anywhere where you're identified as co-borrower, but
On the
just as
loan
borrower.
applications.
Let's look at, let's go back to F. It says borrower's loan application.
Yeah.
Can you read that for us, number 8?
Number what?
It's this bottom part here on
Oh.
this blow up.
Borrower's loan application. Borrower shall be in default if during the loan application process, borrower or any persons or entities acting at the discretion of borrower or with borrower's knowledge or consent gave materially false, misleading, inaccurate information or statements to lender, or failed to provide lender with material information in connection with the loan. Material representation include but are not limited to representations concerning borrower's occupancy of the property and borrower's principal residence.
So, under your sworn testimony, you're saying that you provided the bank knowledge that you not reside there?
Absolutely correct. If you look at the loan application itself, which we don't need because that particular affidavit was thrown out, but if you look at the loan application itself, it has my wife as the borrower with her address in Pine Level. She had owned a house up there in Johnson County at the time. And it has me as the co-borrower with my residence listed as 6003 Slake Ridge Road, Rayford, North Carolina.
Okay. So you're saying that you did not...
So I did not misrepresent anything.
Even though there's a requirement here that the borrower has to live in the residence for 60 days.
And by our understanding, the borrower, my wife, would have to do that, and she did.
But not you.
I've stayed there, but that's not my primary residence. I would maintain my primary residence at 603 Slake Ridge Road.
Okay.
But yeah, I have spent some nights there, of course.
Now, there's a property tax notice which is mailed to 435 Poplar Road.
That's
Is that
right.
right? And it lists you and your wife as the owners. I've got that, but we're not going to dispute that, are we?
No.
Okay. And you receive other bills at 435 Poplar Hill, correct?
I'm sure we do.
Okay.
My wife pays most of the bills, so
Okay. And you said you pay electronically, correct?
I pay electronically for some of my stuff at 603 Slake Ridge Road, and I believe my wife was executed electronically for 435 Poplar.
Okay. So you don't necessarily actually need to receive the bill, you can just go online and pay it,
I
correct?
don't need to receive it, but I do receive hard copies anyway.
Now, going back to just looking at this deed of trust, which is exhibit number E, I mean, the plain language seems to indicate that the borrower, in which you were defined as a borrower, would move into that as a primary residence.
I'm going to object to that, but I don't think that the plain language does do that, so.
Okay, let me strike that.
I don't think most of us consider legalese plain language. But maybe for attorneys. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Uh,
That's fine. Let me hand you what's been marked Exhibit G. Here's copies for the panel. Can you identify what's been marked as Exhibit G?
This says Senator Clark's map.
Okay. Have you seen this before?
Yeah, it was in a newspaper article.
Okay.
Although it's a misnomer because that wasn't my map, I voted against it.
Okay. Let's break that down for a second. There was an amendment.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, there was an amendment that I filed in the General Assembly that would extend a portion of the map under consideration at that time to include the property at the 435 Poplar Hill Road.
Okay. So the amendment you see on the left is pre-amendment,
Yeah,
and then your amendment, which was your own amendment, correct?
that's correct.
Then had a wedge going about 5 miles into 19. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. You voted for the amendment, but did not vote for the overall bill. Is that right?
That's correct.
But you voted for the amendment.
That's correct.
Excuse me just for a second. Okay, thank you. And just to wrap up, going back to Exhibit B, you've attached some bills to this.
Yeah, I just attached a few.
Okay.
I mean, according to the...
In fact, you've only attached one of each, right?
Yeah, just a few, just as a sample of the stuff I received.
And none of the statement dates are before February 28, 2017, are they?
I don't, no, I provided the most current of each document that I had.
Okay.
So I didn't provide a series back to ad infinitum.
Okay, so you picked out the one of each of the most
Yeah,
current?
yeah.
Okay. No further questions.
Anything else?
No further questions, I'm sorry.
You want to submit your evidence?
I didn't know whether, okay, yeah, I've got other witnesses.
Well, but these exhibits.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm moving exhibits C through F into evidence.
The objection?
No.
So did you have some,
I have one or two, if I may.
okay.
Senator, let me show you two documents, and I'm sorry I have only one of them and two of the other. Would you look at that document that I've handed to you and tell me what that is, if you know?
This is a closing disclosure. It was provided to us by the bank just prior to us going to closing on the loan, the property at Poplar Hill.
All right. And who is identified on that document as the borrower?
Dion Clark, my wife.
Let me show you another document and ask you to examine and identify that.
It's a,
Tell the board what it is.
this is a loan application. And on it, it has my wife, Dion Clark, the borrower, has me listed as a co-borrower. of the property.
Mr. Austin, I don't think you've seen that one, but I have only one of those. Yes, I'm good. Are we F now?
It was G.
H.
H.
There we go. No, it would be F. It would be F, I'm sorry. No, it would be G, I'm sorry.
G and H.
We got G. H and H.
It wasn't submitted in there.
Oh, it was
Oh,
not.
it was.
Oh, okay.
Senator Clark, I have marked the closing disclosure document as G, and I have marked the other H, which I believe was from the application, as H, and I'm going to provide them to the panel. Let me ask you if it was, at the time of the closing, your understanding that your wife was the borrower on that loan?
That's correct.
At least two.
Yes.
It just, as a housekeeping, it seems like this is G, the map.
I know, but you didn't
Oh.
offer it into evidence. You
No.
offered C through F into evidence.
Okay.
You needed that. Okay. All right, go ahead with your testimony. Go ahead.
Senator Clark, thank you very much for your testimony. I have no further questions for this witness.
Any rebuttal?
No.
All right, thank you, Senator. You may be excused. Mr. Wallace, do you have any other witnesses?
We do not. Thank you.
All right. And so that would be your showing. If you have any evidence that you wish to submit.
No further evidence in support of Senator Clark. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we would tender those, offer those into evidence. Those last two exhibits, G and H. Thank you.
All right. Any objection to those two?
No, Your Honor.
All right, they're admitted. Well, is that the showing for Senator Clark?
That is, thank you.
All right. Mr. Guerra,
Yes, sir.
would you like to testify, or are you going to stand on your affidavit?
Your Honor, we're actually going to call Attorney Jennifer Cooney.
Sure, it's your defense, or your whatever, so call it you, if you will. Okay. Do you swear the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
All right. State your name and address for me.
Jennifer Cooney, 1926 Fort Bragg Road, Fayetteville, North Carolina, 28303.
As a housekeeping measure, would you make sure, I don't know if you have, but make sure that the court reporter has your cards, the two attorneys, and, well, I think Mr. Clark stated his address enough times that we're okay with that. It's your witness, Mr. Austin, go ahead.
All right, we'll try to make this brief. Can you please state your occupation, Ms. Cooney?
I'm a real estate attorney,
And how long have you been a real estate attorney?
14 years.
And has that all been in Cumberland County?
Yes, sir.
Do you know the petitioner, Mr. James O'Gara?
I have dealt with him on real estate transactions previously, yes, sir.
Okay, were they just residential transactions, commercial transactions?
Mr. O'Gara owns a lot of property. I I can't really recall. I think it was non-owner residential that he was selling.
Okay, but you do both commercial and residential?
I do.
Okay. Are you actively involved in the Democratic Party?
I am a lifelong Democrat, but not really active in the party.
Okay. How did you become, have you done some research regarding the ownership of the property by Mr. Clark in Cumberland County?
Yes, sir. Mr. O'Gara came to see me and reviewed my services to do some title research based on Mr. Clark's ownership of different properties in Cumberland and Hoke.
Okay. And can you tell us what you found out about that?
Yes, sir. So he purchased the property with his parents in Hoke County, like he said, back in '86, I think it was. And then he deeded his property, his interest to his parents in '94.
I'm going to object to that because I think the instrument shows that that was a conveyance made by an attorney, in fact.
But at the
Sustained.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, do you want to clarify your answer?
Well, the principal is charged with the actions of the attorney, in fact, so it's no different if his dad did it for him or if he did it personally. The instruments of record.
Okay. Do you see any issues regarding that general warranty deed as being invalid?
No, sir.
Okay.
Plus, it
And
was over 20 years ago, 24 years ago.
would there be any way to challenge that now?
I think the statute's run on that.
Okay. How many closings have you done?
Over 5,000.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I look at this paperwork every day, so
Okay.
it's exciting.
So you would agree that Exhibit C, which is that general warranty, well, no, not C, but D, is a valid transfer of ownership from Mr. Clark to his parents?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In your research, did you find any property being owned by Mr. Clark?
At all?
In Hoke County?
In Hoke County, no, sir. He has no interest in property in Hoke County whatsoever. And with his father having the exact same name as him, except for Junior and the third, it was difficult, especially with Clark being a common name, but I looked very carefully.
Okay, and it's in your professional opinion that he does not own any property in Hoke County?
True. He has no legal interest. As long as his parents are alive, he has no interest in the property.
Okay. Now, with the deed of trust, which has been marked as Exhibit Number E, this is the deed of trust with State Employees Credit Union. Can you tell us about the riders that, well, tell us, is there any difference between a borrower or a co-borrower?
If he truly is a co-borrower, then a borrower and a co-borrower are jointly and severally liable on the entire note. So they're signing, I think the amount was like $202. So if she can't pay, he's got to pay. If he can't pay, she's got to pay. In the event of a death, divorce, they're both liable on the entire thing. It's not 50-50. But a co-borrower is not a co-signer or a guarantor. They're a borrower.
Okay. So would you say that he is a borrower as defined by the deed of trust?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm going to object to that because I think it's the question that was addressed by Senator Clark was the question of whether or not he understood himself to be a borrower.
That is correct. So I'll sustain that.
Okay. Now, can you tell us under the riders what would be checked if this was to be a second home?
Right. So on the riders of deeds of trust, it's very important. The lenders want to make sure they know the occupancy. Occupancy is very important for deeds of trust because it's going to affect the terms. You're going to have a lower interest rate if it's where you live versus an investment property or beach house or a rental. So if it's, in my experience, if it's a rental or a non-owner occupied property, it's going to have a 1 to 4 family rider or a second home rider. And that's going to delete number 6 on page 6 about the occupancy.
Okay. So one of the boxes on page 1 of Exhibit E would have been checked if that.
If the credit union was aware that it was not going to be owner occupied, yes, sir.
Okay. Would there be any way that it would not have a rider if the State Employees Credit Union had been notified?
Objection, that's pure speculation.
In my experience, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Sustained. I'm sorry. Y'all, we will disregard that.
Okay. Well, let me reframe that. In your experience, have you ever seen a second home which was closed that didn't have either the 1-4 family rider or the second home rider?
No, sir. I've done lots of closings with state employees. I've even done some that are non-owner occupied, and they all had those riders.
take a look at, and I don't have copies of the exhibits G and H. Can you take a look at those copies and see if they support Mr. Clark or Senator Clark's position that he somehow disclosed that he would not have to be a resident?
So H is the loan application. On the loan application, we see one of these in every file. This is called a 1003 loan application. Mrs. Clark was the main primary borrower, and Mr. Clark was the co-borrower. Her address on the application was listed as a Pine Level, North Carolina address. His was listed as the Rayford address. By the conclusion from this, I would think that the state employees would be thinking that the two of them were going to move into the Poplar Hill address.
Objection. Pure speculation.
Well, it's,
Sustained.
well, let me ask you this then. The deed of trust requires that the borrowers move in under Section 6, correct?
Yes.
And then under Section 8, it says the borrowers be default if they made any material misrepresentations related to the occupancy of the property as borrower's principal residence.
Correct.
Okay.
But if I could say one more thing about the application, according to Mr. Clark's logic, the state employees was under the impression that Mrs. Clark was going to remain at Crescent Street, just because her address was listed there on the application.
Well, usually during the application, they haven't bought the property, and there'd be no way that they could use that as their address.
And on Exhibit G, this is the closing disclosure. In the mortgage financing world, we call it the CD. This doesn't really say anything other than on where it says borrower, it says Dion Clark. But unfortunately, there's only room for usually one borrower's name if they have different addresses listed on the application. So that would be the explanation for why his name is not listed as borrower there. It doesn't mean he's not a borrower.
In your experience,
I'm going to object to that, and that's speculation as to whether
Okay.
that is the reason. I don't know what the
Okay.
reason was, and I don't think Ms. Annie does. We never know what the bank's reason is.
Well, the attorneys prepare these, so I do know.
We do get instructions.
let me ask you this. In your experience, would you ever advise a co-borrower not to move in the residence within 60 days?
When I am handling a transaction, I let the clients know what the documents are stating. We do have a lot of, especially with the VA loans, there's a lot of mortgage fraud going on, so that is a big hot button item with the mortgage lenders. So I do talk about the occupancy requirements.
Okay. Otherwise, what could it be considered?
Fraud.
Objection. I've moved to strike that.
Sustained.
Your Honor, I would, she's clearly an expert in.
Well, you haven't offered her as an expert, and I'm not sure, I mean, I don't think there's anything here that she can definitively say is fraud. So, I think Mr. Clark testified that he had some agreement with the bank. I don't know whether there's,
Okay, no further questions.
any questions, Mr. Wallace?
Did you close the loan transaction that resulted in the acquisition of that property in Vander?
No, sir. Mr. Barfield did.
So whatever you might do in a closing transaction by way of explaining documents to your clients is your practice and laudable, but that's not necessarily true for all attorneys, is it?
I couldn't say what Mr. Barfield does.
Looking at Exhibit C, do you have a copy of Exhibit C before you?
Yes, sir.
What interest was conveyed to Senator Clark in that transaction back in 1988?
A 1/2 undivided interest.
How is that a 1/2 undivided interest if it's a conveyance to husband and wife and their son, an adult at that time.
Because real estate law says if you're conveying it to a husband and wife, that's one entity in the law. So they get a 1/2 interest and he gets the other 1/2 interest.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Any reader direct?
No, Your Honor.
You may be excused, Ms. Green.
Thank you.
Any further evidence?
Yes. Mr. O'Gara.
I know, it seems like a lot.
Mr. O'Gara, if you'll step forward, place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. All right, have a seat. Mr. Austin?
Mr. O'Gara, tell us why you filed your petition.
Well, there's quite a bit of news out there in the public. I kept reading in the newspaper this, that, and a while back ago, I noticed that the map had changed, and somehow or another, there was a house being built out here. And then I seen where there was a finger reaching out to this house. And like in the Washington paper, it's saying the most blatant gerrymandering in the country. And I just felt like something's wrong here.
When you mention a map, that's been previously marked as Exhibit G. It's been previously marked as G. Let's remark that as what's the next number?
I don't think we entered it, did we?
No, it's right there.
I think H was last.
What are we up to now?
I think the I.
Can you identify what's been marked as exhibit number I?
Yes, I can't remember exactly which paper, but this is where I was indicating the gerrymandering. Off here on the left-hand side is the original map that was set by the party that I believe Senator Clark was also on that committee that made that up, where I noticed they eliminated Spring Lake out of it, which got my attention. And then I noticed a little later on where where he was on a committee and asked him to incorporate his home into this District 21. When it actually, from what I could see, was blatantly in District 19. Then the Justice Department, I guess, came back through and kind of straightened things out, which left his house out in the middle of District 19. And brought Spring Lake back in for I believe he was on the committee that requested this.
Well, did you hear his earlier testimony that he made an amendment to include that?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. There must have been a reason.
And did you contact Attorney Cooney?
Yes, I did. I went down and retained Attorney Cooney because in the past I've dealt with it. She's always been straight up with me.
And did she provide you a report?
Yes, she did.
Can you identify what's been marked as exhibit number or exhibit letter J?
This is the report that Attorney Cooney gave.
And according to that report and her testimony today, Mr. Clark owns no property in Hope County.
No property whatsoever.
Chairman, have not previously been provided with this document, and to the extent that it purports to be an expert opinion, I certainly want to object to its consideration by this panel, at least until we've had a chance to evaluate it. And it was not, of course, offered through its author. It's being offered through the apparent client associated with that.
Let's hear her testimony, then when they submit it, you can check to it.
Did you retain Ms. Cooney to give you a report on the ownership of the property?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And is this the report that she gave you, this letter?
Yes, it
Exhibit
is.
J? All right, I'd move I and J into evidence.
Any objection? Any objection to I?
Is
That's the map of.
I the map? We don't have objection to I. I do have objection to J.
I submitted any objection to J.
I have an objection to J,
Okay.
the letter, which I have not.
We'll hear it.
The last, when one gets through the analysis of the property transactions, the last paragraph purports to offer an opinion with respect to the very matter that the board is tasked with considering here, and it is well beyond the authority of a real estate lawyer to opine as to the place of residence of Senator Clark.
Do you have an objection to any of the other content in the letter?
And it's not submitted for that purpose. It's not.
Well, it's being handed to the trier.
Do you have any objection to anything else?
I have objection insofar as Senator Clark testified that he did not understand that he was the borrower, and yet she draws conclusions about,
Well,
and I'm looking at the very first paragraph.
well, the documents speak for themselves. And
The documents speak for
and
themselves,
she is a
and
right
so I'm not sure that this adds value to
Well,
the panel's consideration of these issues.
It may or may not, that's for us to decide, but I don't see that as an opinion, but as a statement of.
Thank you, sir.
Having heard you, I'm going to admit this, except for the last paragraph. I'm going to strike the last paragraph from it.
And we don't have an objection to that.
Are you finished with Mr. O'Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace, you got some?
Thank you. No, sir. We don't have any questions for this.
All right, you may be excused, Mr. O'Hare. Mr. Ashton, Mr. Austin, we're on now.
Now that I've moved for I and J, I think I've gotten everything I needed in. We're done.
I got J.
I is the map.
Oh, map itself, okay. I swear I have not moved from this chair, but I have all set there. In here, you have to have a map. All right. Yeah, it's one. All righty. Any closing arguments, Ross? I'll give you an opportunity.
Thank you. I think the panel has heard from Senator Clark at considerable length regarding his actual place of residence in Hoke County. He has resided in that place of residence since 2002. That is a place of residence that in no way has he abandoned since 2002. Whatever the nature of the transaction occurring as between the attorney in fact acting in behalf of Senator Clark and the grantees in that transaction, that has no consequence whatsoever to the question of whether Senator Clark has resided in that property since 2002. He is not required to own that property in whole or in part in order to establish and maintain that place as his place of residence for purposes of voting registration, for purposes of driver's license registration, for purposes of those other responsibilities of citizenship, which he more than amply fulfills. So with respect to the question of whether or not Senator Clark has adequately established the Hope County property as his place of residence, we think the record is clear and uncontradicted. And we would add further that there is no evidence in this record tending to show that he has in any way abandoned that property. Now, the statutory scheme contemplates that he has the burden of proof, and we have more than met that burden of proof, and there is no evidence contradicting his testimony showing that he resides in Hope County at that property and has not abandoned it. With respect to the property in Cumberland County, which Mrs. Clark sought to acquire, and as to which she became an applicant for a loan, it is Senator Clark's testimony that he did not understand himself to be the borrower. He did not intend to live in that property, but neither, of course, did he intend to misstate in any way that which was pointed out by petitioner's counsel. He participated in the loan transaction, and as you heard him say, there are lots of things that real estate lawyers place before their clients for execution in a closing that the clients don't read and the clients don't fully understand, and Senator Clark in no way understood that language, those two small paragraphs in a 15-page instrument, to be obligating him in some way. His wife, perhaps, but did those paragraphs obligate him? No. In any event, they don't evidence a change of residence on the part of Senator Clark. They don't evidence any abandonment of his Hope County property. They don't evidence an intention to take up residence in Cumberland County and abandoning his Hope County property, and we think, therefore, that Senator Clark has more than adequately established his residency and his eligibility to file as a candidate for office in Hope County. We would ask that the challenge be dismissed.
Mr. Alden.
Thank you, and I appreciate the panel's patience in getting through this. My closing will not be all that long. I just asked the panel to take a look at the totality of the evidence here, and there is a lot of conflicts. First and foremost, this is not old family property. This was not family that was passed down generation to generation. This property was bought from strangers. It was, as the senator has testified, an investment piece of property. Those were his words, an investment that he bought with his parents. And as soon as that property was paid off, he transferred, or he had his power of attorney, which is just as legit as anything else, transfer that property out of his name. If there was truly an intent for him to keep that property, his name would still be on that property. Instead, it goes to his parents, and his parents have a will. We don't know what that will is. If there was truly an intent, he would have kept that property. If he was going to maintain that as his residence. Let's look at some other conflicting evidence we have. He testified that he sleeps there. He also sleeps in Cumberland County. That's a wash. He has bills in Hope County. He testified that there's bills in Cumberland County. Again, that's a wash. What's not a wash is the fact that he solely sponsored an amendment to capture to go from 5 miles into District 19 in order to circle his property and then say, so that it would be captured, and so he'd be under 21 or District 21. I think that shows the motivation. I think that shows the intent that he had moved. He no longer owned property in Hope County, owned property in Cumberland County, and he wanted to maintain that seat. I think, as any lawmaker or anybody that dwells in the property and owns any certain parts of property, cannot just say, oh, I didn't read the document, and I didn't read what a special residential loan under Fannie Mac said. It clearly says that you're going to be the occupancy, clearly identifies Senator as being a co-borrower, and it clearly says you're not to make any false statements about this. I find it disingenuous that we have an affidavit where he says that he is, and I refer to number 2, I'm the legal owner and resident of a home in Hope County. He is not. I find it that when you have untruthful statements like this, that shows an intent to hide, an intent to cover up, an attempt that, in this very case, play 2 factors, have it both ways. Have it where if I don't get the amendment passed, and I can even vote against it, I still have my other place. I don't think it's fair, I don't think it's constitutional, and I don't think it's what the people of the state of North Carolina would want to have happening here. Consequently, I think he should be disqualified. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to deliberate. I do want to read for a minute about the burden of proof. 163A 1029. The burden of proof shall be upon the candidate who must show by preponderance of the evidence of the record as a whole that he or she qualified to be a candidate for office. Challenge is based upon the question of residency. The candidate must show the following. An actual abandonment of the first domicile coupled with the intent not to return to the first domicile, the acquisition of a new domicile by actual residence at another place, and the intent of making a newer domicile permanent domicile. In this case, I think the reverse of that. I mean, it is clearly, he's not saying I've moved into this district. He's saying I've not left this district. So therefore, he has to prove that he has not abandoned the first domicile, and he has an intent to return to the first domicile, and the acquisition acquisition of a new piece of property is not, in fact, his domicile, and he has no intent of making it his domicile. I think that's his burden under the statute in this situation, since he says I am where I've been and not where they say. So that in mind, we. Like any other tribunal must, unlike any other tribunal, we must deliberate in public. So we throw it up for deliberations, gentlemen, or a motion, or whatever, wherever we are.
Based on the information attached today, I'm going to make a motion that we dismiss. I'm going to challenge it.
I don't think we dismiss. I think the motion should be that we find that Senator Clark has met his burden under the statute to establish where his domicile is.
Okay. Now I'll amend my motion to those words.
You didn't have any second. You didn't have a second, so you don't have to amend it.
Okay.
Make a new motion.
I'll make a new motion that Senator Clark has met the burden of proof in his domicile.
Is there a second to that? I'll second. Any discussions? I want to talk about well, go ahead.
My biggest concern is I don't think there's been a clear intention presented on Senator Clark's part. Now, he's a good senator, right? I think he's done a good job overall, but the map tells it all, in my opinion, as far as intention goes. And there could be different motivation behind why that was drawn that way. Maybe some Republicans didn't want him challenging them because they know he's a sharp cookie in their area, and they came to agree. I don't know. That's all speculation. But he's not convinced me that after we leave here that he's going to go back to Hope County, drive to Raleigh, back to Hope, drive to Raleigh, and reside in that domicile. I think they've got a nice home here, and I don't know, I'm not sure the background, where the new house is on Poplar. Was that part of an old district before it was redistricted that he was in? I don't know. Why would you get a house out of your district? There's a lot of land around here to get. If I was in the Senate, I think I'd be more circumspect in where I purchase my property. That's why I don't concur, with the other two.
Well, I would say this: domicile does not require you to be the owner of the place for which you live, because if it did, then everybody that rents an apartment would not be eligible to run for office. So that does not establish your domicile. You can stay under the bridge over here if that's where you live and return every night. That is your domicile.
But you have to reside there night after night.
Well, you have to reside there the majority.
If you're representing that you live in their district and care for their concerns.
Well, you have to reside there a majority of the time, but not every night. And so there's been I've heard no testimony that rebuts Senator Clark's testimony that he occasionally stays there. I heard no testimony that said that they had any evidence that he stayed there on a continual basis. The burden is on the senator, and the senator testified that it was his intent to return to that home, that he had not abandoned that domicile, and he certainly showed some proofs that indicated that that's where he still lived. So I felt that by the preponderance of the evidence that he did establish it, and there was no rebuttal evidence that established otherwise. There was rebuttal evidence that says he's got a problem with his mortgage lender. But doesn't go to the question of domicile. There was evidence that he doesn't own that property in Rayford, but no evidence that he doesn't live there still. That's my feeling about it, and I find that on my personal opinion, by the preponderance, he did live it. And consequently, if I haven't, I will say that about that. Do you have anything to say?
I think you said it all.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Long?
No, that's all.
All right. There being no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion that Senator Clark has proven that his domicile is in Hood County, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by the same sign.